What's more important, that something looks good or that something is good? Now, if I were a betting man, I'd say most of you probably say that it's more important to actually be good. But when you look at what most people buy, you begin to realize pretty quickly that function almost always seems to take a backseat to form. In fact, there are times when that's the case to an almost comedic degree. I mean, all it takes is a quick glance at these two trucks to understand what I'm talking about. One of those makes more sense than the other. There's a reason people spend so much money putting pretty colors in their computers. It helps with FPS, I promise. But it gets even worse whenever you consider that branding is basically just another example of form over function. A single logo, if it's considered fashionable enough, can change the price of something by thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, just by the fact that it's on something. That logo doesn't change the function in the slightest, but it still calls for a premium either way. I mean, there's a reason why main brand foods still outsell off brands, even if they are literally the exact same thing. And honestly, as things get more expensive, that tends to become the case even more. If you've ever watched any of those luxury house tours where people are showing off multi-million-dollar apartments or mansions, something you don't often think of is whether that place is actually nice to live in. And the answer to that, like 9 times out of 10, is typically gonna be no, it's not. Sure, they're fancier and bigger, but they aren't necessarily going to be comfier or better designed. They just look good on camera because that's exactly what they were built for. This is especially true whenever it comes to modern constructions, which are built primarily as a way to put your money somewhere and get it back or get more of it when you resell it later. It's form over function to an almost ridiculous degree. But let me ask you something. Is this really a bad thing? Yes, it can get out of hand, especially in places like that, but I mean, the more mundane areas where function takes a backseat to form. Things like a slightly odd-shaped couch or a table that's a little too small but looks really cute. And the answer to that is, of course not. If you really wanted everything to prioritize function, then all of our houses would look like warehouses and the world would just be bland. Oh wait. But oftentimes you don't need to sacrifice that much function to get a ton of form. I mean, you could theoretically make the most aerodynamically efficient car in the world, but it would just look like a blob. But if you sacrifice just a little bit of efficiency, you can make all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Also, you don't necessarily need to sacrifice function to make something look nice. I think paint is the best example of this. You might not realize it, but paint is probably one of the most important things that you never think about. It's essentially the first line of protection against corrosion. If paint disappeared tomorrow, the world would fall apart pretty quickly. So in many cases, there is a symbiosis between form and function. Because we're already painting something, adding a little bit of color doesn't really cost anything, and in fact, sometimes can make it even stronger or cheaper depending on how it's done. And that applies to a lot of things other than just paint. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things is when function doesn't take a backseat to form, but they work together to make something truly beautiful. But when the trade-off is required between the two, that's also where people's personalities really start to shine. For example, I usually prefer to prioritize function over form. I didn't get this chair for the bit, by the way. This is the actual chair in my bedroom. And let me just say, it might stand out like a sore yellowish orange thumb, but it is the comfiest chair I've ever sat in my entire life, and you cannot take that away from me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe for daily uploads, and I will see you tomorrow. I just realized there is a washing machine going in the background for this whole video.